in the next morning, exhausted, she shouted out, "That's my Bill," and burst into tears. She knew he was alive. And that's the last time I saw you and Ruthie and all of you together. That was a very, very poignant moment. So thank God he was all right. But him telling the story of the dancers in between the takes, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got to experience that.
Well, you know, the real tragedy of that is that her death derailed him from his
It did.
PhD
It did.
course, and he never did finish it.
And also, Dr. Berger, who was his advisor, was not disposed to give Bill the extra time he needed to finish his degree because he had taken off time in between sessions to take care of Joni. And eventually, the university either wouldn't allow it or Berger just simply refused to do it. He wasn't exactly a lovely guy, and that is one of the reasons Bill couldn't finish. He wouldn't give him the time to make up the time. Oh, that was tragic, I thought.
Yes.
It was, and certainly Joni didn't want to have done that to him, you know.
No,
And that was very, and I remember the time, fortunately she could type well, much better than I could. You will remember when he was putting his thesis together.
mm-hmm.
He was, of course, exhausted all the time and still did it anyway. And she typed it for him, and she'd made a carbon copy, which turned out to be crucial. And the morning he was supposed to turn it in, it was all ready, and it was in a briefcase. And he made the mistake of putting it on top of the car, open. And some great big, huge gust of wind hit. Just as he drove out onto the freeway, it blew all over, gone, scattered to the winds, all of it, this thick. And fortunately, he could turn around and drive home and turn in the copy. So they couldn't say, "You didn't get it done in time, you're finished." They couldn't say that. So I'm hoping you have a copy of that thesis. I never got to read it. I was fascinated by submarine archaeology.
I don't have a copy that I know of.
I hope you do.
I hope that Ruthie and I find it.
I hope you do too. That would be wonderful to read. I read his notes. I read his studies for the grottos beneath the strait, so that, I mean, I knew he'd found the evidence. And despite being in incredible pain from sinus headaches, which were awful, he did the diving. And he'd found the skulls, and it was in his thesis.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if anyone ever used the information to some good purpose, because it was a great breakthrough, you know, for how people crossed to what became this country. But it was fascinating to me, and I never got to read it. I would love to have read it, but
I got to check with Ruthie and see if we have a copy.
Check with Ruthie, or even part of it. Oh, I'm moving around. Sorry.
Yeah. No. If you sit forward, you're out of the frame.
Oh, I know. I did that. I narrated a session of Good Morning America also for the Mother of the Year in 2004 was Judith Byra. And she is the wonderful woman who was selected by Emeril Lagasse to be Mother of the Year for her great feat and her great generosity in raising two children, 16-year-old twins, who were left to me in a deathbed will when their mother died, their mother having been a friend of this lovely lady and me. And I had no way to raise these children. I had a sick husband. I didn't own the house I lived in. I had no space and no money. And I was wondering, what am I going to do with 16-year-old decathlon champion straight-A students from Lowell High School, which was here in San Francisco, who should have every opportunity in the world. I have nothing to offer them. I don't know what to do. I can't bear the thought that these kids would be in foster care. When behind me in the hospital room, where their mother was lying dead in the bed next to my hand, and I had just let go of her hand and looked at the girls, and they were standing there looking at me. Behind me in the doorway came a voice that said, "I'm so sorry to be late. My flight was delayed. I'm here to take the girls home." And what I hadn't known was Judith Byra, Mother of the Year, had promised their mother, before they were born, that if anything ever happens to you, I'll take the kids. And she kept her word. And she put them through the University of Michigan, and they have wonderful careers today and wonderful lives. So that's how that happened. So I was able to help a tiny few dollars financially, only tiny. But when Good Morning America said, yep, out of 3,000 candidates, you're it, I got to narrate it.
Nice.
And they still play it on YouTube. You can still find it. And they elected her again to repeat it because they decided in the 40 years they've been on television as Good Morning America, we were the best show of all. So there it is.
What's the name?
It's called Good Morning America.
Right.
And she is Judy Byra.
Okay.
Which is Bywra.
Okay.
Interesting Polish Catholic name. No one can spell it. Anyway, she's doing very well now. She put them through school, and to do it, she lost her car, her job, and her house. Put them through the University of Michigan and kept her word. Now that, to me, is Mother of the Year.
Yes.
So what a privilege it was to see my younger self in that film. And my friend Barbara Hawk also narrated, she being the woman who now lives next door, and I helped take care of her. So it all comes around.
How about that?
How about that? Yep, that was a grand time, an amazing once-in-a-lifetime thing.
So now here we are in San Francisco. You've lived here in this building for
2 years and 4 months, almost to the day, and I shall never leave it alive. Never.
No one here gets out alive anyway.
And
so.
no one dares leave their rent-controlled apartment. No,
Yes.
I would never give up this apartment, and you have yet to see my apartment.
Yes.
I will babysit dogs while you look at my apartment.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's a place if I live any place else, I will never give this up. I will pay the rent here for eternity.
Sure.
You know, whatever
Well,
I have to do.
You could sublet it.
Yes, I could do that, but I just want it to be here. I want it to be here when I open the door. There it is. It's just a perfect place for me.
Very good.
Very selfish, I think. But I did live in San Francisco for 32 years when I worked here before, then retired for 10 on the Oregon coast. Missed the city every day. Had an opportunity to move back because I was lucky enough to know someone who would trust me to rent it over the phone with no paperwork and no money changing hands and hold it for me. And that was the manager of this building, the wonderful Brian Cook, because he knew me from when I took Barbara's apartment when she traveled. He knew my checks didn't bounce and that I took care of the place, and she trusted me with her life, and that made a difference. So I could call up and say, hey, Brian, I can never afford to live in this neighborhood, but I need to be somewhere near Barbara so that I can help take care of her. She's starting to need that, and I'd like to do that. And I thought, is there somewhere where there's a rat hole down in the Mission that I could afford? And I told him what I could afford, which is nothing. He said, oh, how about my building? And I thought, you must be joking. Have you lost your mind, you know? So I said, well, I can afford a maximum of $1,200 a month, including utilities. I thought he'd probably choke to death with laughter. He said, oh, how about $1,150? I said, sure.
Sold American.
Got it. So over the phone, we made the deal. How about that? So in the middle of COVID, I couldn't get a mover to take me to San Francisco. I was packed up and ready to go. I do plan in advance. I had very little to take. I dumped everything. I was an easy move. So I had to bribe a moving company. Again, it was someone I knew who could recommend someone else. Double the price to stick me in the back of an 18-wheeler on the load of something else and get me to San Francisco, which they did. And their recommendation went like this. I called a very reputable mover who'd moved me before and said, hey, Anthony, anybody to move me in the middle of COVID to San Francisco? Ha, ha, ha. He said, well, there's one outfit. He said, let me put it this way. They might get drunk and break stuff, but they'll show up. I said, good, that's company for me. So the next morning we left.
Now, did everything arrive intact?
Absolutely perfect. And this wonderful manager here, Brian Cook, they got here with the truck before I could get here. I was on the last plane out of Dodge before the governors closed the border to air traffic. That was the plan.
Sweet.
So I had 12 hours to get out of here and get a ticket, and a good friend who's really good with computer stuff got us the tickets and got me here.
Nice.
It was very nice. And Brian opened the door and made sure they moved everything in and locked it up, and it was here when I got here. Lucky me.
So what's a day in the life for Dana?
Today?
Yeah.
Well, in general, at First Light, I volunteer as a friend of Lafayette Park, which is a volunteer outfit
Right across the street.
across the street in Lafayette Park to help the gardeners clean up the garbage, the needles, the used condoms, and now the remains of fentanyl, which don't require needles to do. You know, you've got to have butane lighters, and you've got to have tinfoil and rolled dollar bills to smoke your stuff in. But at any rate, so the needles have abated a bit, but we try to get there, or I do, before the toddlers and the dogs do. So if a dog eats that, it's either dead or in heavy-duty surgery, and same with a kid.
Yeah.
So I go before they get there and clean up the abandoned homeless camps and look in the hot spots for the stuff that I know will be there.
Now, are you the only one who does that, or is
In the
there
mornings-
a group of you?
Well, there's a group of us who do it once a month, but I'm the only one I know of that does it to this degree every morning because I can, because I live right on the park here, 20 feet from the entrance. And I have free time in the mornings that many people who are still working don't. Our little organization is composed of about 20 people. It's been around for about 16 years. It's called the Cleaning and Greening by the Friends of Lafayette Park. And we get together the first Saturday of every month to do what the gardeners need doing. But I'm the only one who comes virtually every morning with my little laundry cart Coombe garbage wagon that I've outfitted. And my principal tools are a long-handled pickup stick and a pair of salad tongs, and of course gloves and
Yes.
sharps containers. So I clean up garbage, and all manner of things are in the park. It's quite amazing. And clean up after the poor soul who's homeless has left it, who's abandoned it because it's wet. You can't imagine where they go next or how they do it. And the detritus of lives is absolutely tragic.
Yeah.
There's makeup and wigs and clothes designed to make someone just, hope to God, attractive enough to make somebody want to get them through the night. That's what we find. Some of them make it and some of them don't. So I'm prepared for an OD body every time. I found lots of half gone, immediately, carted off to 911, but no one dead so far. But if I do this long enough, there will be. So this park has 11 acres, and it's got lots of places to sleep that are better than other places.
Forgive me, but it seems unfair that at this stage in your life, you would be doing that.
Oh, thank you for
It's-
saying that, but
it's-
it's the opposite.
Well, no, I understand. I understand
It's the opposite. It's a privilege
the
to
value of it.
It is greatly valuable to me to do something that useful. It is greatly valuable to me to the point where I'm sure it's more valuable to me than it is to the park. But it helps the gardeners who are now glorified garbage men and women. That's what they do. There's no time to plant, there's time to clean up garbage. Not just from the homeless, but from the middle class and the rich, who leave the remains of expensive deli food, let's say smoked Norwegian salmon, and half-empty champagne bottles and corks on the ground, or they have indeed put them, along with the deli receipt, in the trash, but the homeless, of course, take it out to try to eat what's there, and aren't in any frame of mind to put it back in the can. So it's hard to know who's guiltiest of that. So it is something that at my age, which is now 78, that I can do that is really valuable to many people and dogs and birds and kids in the neighborhood. I clean up the stuff that can kill them. And to me, that is contributing. So it's a privilege.
It's a beautiful thing.
I think so too. And
But what would you do what would you be doing if you weren't doing that?
Well, I do some other things. I might be doing this in any available park if I were doing the same thing. I would be doing some hospice care. I'm helping Barbara sufficiently now next door that takes extra time. But if in fact she no longer needs me, then if I'm still able to do it, I will volunteer as a hospice worker with several different churches who need the assistance. That I would like to do. And something I do that I love is make customized crossword puzzles for people for special occasions and parties which involve the names of their pets and the places they've traveled and things that are meaningful to them, so that they can work them with a group of people in perhaps a party setting when they want something to do when the weather's bad.
Or a family setting.
It's a family crossword puzzle. So I've done one for Christmas for children. I've done one based on the Tudor queens, the wives of Henry VIII, for a history buff. I've done one on cats, and I'm currently doing one in transliterated Japanese for friends who like haiku. So this is teaching me a lot. I don't speak Japanese or even read transliterated Japanese, but I'm learning a lot of words doing it in order to make them fit the puzzle. So I do that. And I like cooking for elder people who can't cook well anymore. I think that will be my next business. I always like having a business. I've had a pet sitting business for 10 years before I moved here. We called it Pea, Poop, and Scoop Limited.
Gotcha.
And although that was not the formal name, but that's what it was.
Dana's side hustle.
You bet,
Yeah.
you bet. It was, and I donated my fees to the Humane Society and the Newport Animal Shelter in Newport, Oregon.
Very cool.
So that was tremendous fun. Made wonderful friends, wonderful animals, just loved it. Still in touch with all of them. And I did that for a while here until I realized I'm too old. I can still crawl under a bed, but I can't crawl under a bed and drag out a screaming, enraged cat when there's a fire going on and handle it well enough.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You might get your hands shredded.
And I certainly did upon one occasion. I
Yes,
said, you know,
so
you
did
can't
I.
do that anymore, Dana.
No.
Join the club.
Once is enough.
I was bleeding all over the handmade white rug of the owner and right upstairs in this building, and she didn't hold it against me.